right, good evening. I call this meeting of the Board of Park Commissioners to order at 6:30. Grace, will you please take roll?
Alderperson Chandakundiger.
Here.
Alderperson Definite Ledvina.
Here.
Alderperson Rosh.
Here.
Randy Silky.
Present.
Ryan Jennings.
Here.
Melissa Thiel Collar.
Here.
Jim Kneisel.
Here.
And both of the teen advisors, Connor Mason and Connor Goodman, are excused.
Thank you, Grace. Next on the agenda, public comments upon matters not on the agenda. Are there any people wishing to speak about an item, about an issue not on the agenda? Anybody in internet world who might be with us? Last call, anyone wishing to speak about matters not on the agenda? Okay, moving on. Under items, number 1, consideration and possible action to approve the Board of Park Commissioners minutes from the June 15th, 2023 meeting.
So, go ahead. So moved. Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Item 2, consideration and possible action to accept donation of canvas paper and frames from Walmart at a value of $2,500.
Make a motion to approve. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you to Walmart for that generous donation for our programs. Item 3, consideration and possible action to accept a $2,500 donation from the Wochinske Family Foundation for the Recreation Scholarship Fund.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you again to the Wochinske family. They've been regular contributors and donors to our Rec Scholarship Fund. Thank you very much. Item 4, presentation from Mead and Hunt regarding the survey and data collection on the comprehensive plan. Marty, do you want to introduce who we've got and set the stage?
We have Mark and Brian from Mead and Hunt are here, and they are here to basically give you an update on the progress of our comp plan, which I believe in seeing their presentation, it basically covers a lot of the data that they have been collecting. So it's a great opportunity to see the information that they have, possibly ask any questions that you might have, but understand it's not a finished product by any stretch of the imagination. So I'll turn it over to Mark.
Thank you. So hi, Mark Sauer, Mead and Hunt, and Brian Carranza. We're both planners and happy to have been working with you guys thus far, and we'll give you a little bit about where we're at in this process and kind of what to expect going forward. So we are pretty casual, so please, if you have any questions, just interrupt me. Otherwise, we'll just chat. So again, who we are, we're kind of running through the who, what, when, where, why, how. We Mead and Hunt, if you don't know anything about us, we are in De Pere. We're located on Lawrence Drive, right by Shearing Road. That's our Green Bay office. Otherwise, you can see we're based in Madison, in Middleton actually, and just have really grown out of Wisconsin. Approximately 1,200 people in, call it 40 offices nationwide. So nationwide services, but our core here is in Wisconsin and even in De Pere. So our markets and services kind of just broad reaching. Planning is obviously one of those, and park planning specifically is what Brian and I like to do. So your project, we have been working with the city since May 25th. We met with Marty then, kind of got a rundown of how things have operated in the past. A lot of good history on what we can sort of expect, the last corp that was done, and just the approach to data gathering. We have had a public survey live for approximately 1 month. We've done quite a broad-reaching distribution of postcards. Hopefully some of you have seen those, or through the Facebook Parks and Rec page, and we'll go into a little bit of that. But what we've been doing is really triaging the existing document, getting some of the maps in order, preparing for a public meeting, which we held just before this meeting, sort of same turnout as the last round, unfortunately. But we've also gotten into some of the quantitative analysis and some of the qualitative analysis, and that's kind of where we're at in the process. We do plan to meet with stakeholders in the community, school districts, soccer, baseball, the kind of the larger stakeholders that are invested in your parks that you want to keep around for the long term. We're going to speak with them specifically. We're also doing an operations and maintenance review, kind of understanding what core services you have, and how those can best be supported moving forward. Ideally, we'll bring a draft of the full document back to you all in September for kind of a first review. That we've given some flex in the schedule. The goal is really to finish this process by the end of the year. So we've given some flex sort of at the back end if we want to push that off till October. Things, the holidays start to ramp up, people get busy. We want to make sure, because there really isn't a major deadline, right? So we want to make sure people have enough time to review and that you are all comfortable with this and Marty's comfortable with it, using it moving forward. So that's probably the longest slide I'll have. So again, the public survey, we kicked it off in June. We did a Facebook blast. We got a very high spike in responses at the beginning. We were at the first beer garden distributing postcards and talking to people about it, kind of building excitement at that time. We left stacks at the following locations you see on there, and have replenished as necessary. Just today we were down at the farmers market before this and before the public meeting, kind of handing out postcards, talking to people again, sort of just trying to build excitement. And when you say parks, people do kind of, turn up and they're a little bit interested. So that's a good thing. To date, we actually, as of today, have 333 responses. Generally, just a couple of the statistics we're looking at so far. Pretty good age distribution, so you're getting, I'm not sure how those people under 5 responded, but you are getting a pretty good distribution of age. What we're seeing, the majority of responses are your residents. Really, the survey is open to anybody, so it's good to see that. And then surprisingly, 75% are female. So it's just kind of an interesting note there. Favorites that we're seeing, as you might expect, Voyager Park, Fox River Trail, Legion Park, the things with the big amenities or the activities, right? I should preface all of this by saying there isn't anything that is particularly surprising that we've seen. So, but we'll get into some of the specifics. Activities, walking, playgrounds, athletics. What we're seeing is some people are asking for more walking trails specifically, not necessarily park programming, but hey, just give me a path from park to park. Give me a space that's off street that I can kind of meander and do my own thing. About 40% of people don't actually engage in winter recreation. So you tell me if that's surprising or not. I don't do much myself, despite being an avid outdoors person. So, specifically talking about a couple things that hopefully hit close to home with some of you. Service-wise, we looked at both the Forestry Department core services as well as the Parks Department. Tree removal and pruning are the two highest responses there. Stump removal and sort of resident education about services are lower, so not terribly surprising there. In terms of park department core services, obviously you see lawn mowing, snow removal, garbage collection, kind of those 3 typical things that you'd like to see continued. One of the things we've seen is a response towards nature and kind of nature programming. So whether that be nature-based playground equipment or, again, wildlife viewing opportunities, trails through passive areas. In the work we do, we're seeing that as a trend across a lot of communities. I think the pandemic had something to do with that, right? People just want to get outside and kind of look around.
And I'm pretty sure we've got a spot they can go view deer on a regular basis now. Is that right, Marty?
Webster Avenue.
Webster Avenue.
Dogs, we wanted to talk about that specifically. So we've asked it in a couple different ways. The direct question, you can see the response. Those first 2 bars are actually yes to the question. So yes, dogs should be allowed in parks with an owner and on a leash, as well as yes, dogs should be allowed in parks with an owner on a leash, but not allowed in sort of sport, fields, athletic areas. So if you're walking your dog, if you're going to an event, dogs on parks seem to be a little bit more favorable than what we heard the last time. Only 25% say no dogs in parks. We're also seeing that in sort of the long form responses where people just have an opportunity to say, what else do you want to see, right? People are saying more dogs in certain spaces. So I'd call it at least sort of 60-40 in that regard. And then trees. Trees continue to be highly valued, both pruning and care as well as planting. So there's a overall perception that street trees are adequately, if not well maintained. People continue to believe, 80% of people believe trees continue to be important here. So think about that. And then safety was another point to touch on, and this was more or less the question being asked, do you have any safety concerns? I'll point out that roughly 50% of those responses, of those that did choose to respond to this, said no concerns. So the others that did not respond, we assume would have no concerns, right? Some of the things we're seeing, and I'll just group these very broadly, is when people tend to be alone or feel sort of overwhelmed by the presence of others. That came up quite a bit at Voyager Park, where you've got a lot of space, and then you've got a lot of sort of different age groups intermixing with each other. So I see some head nodding. Hopefully that's stuff you're familiar with. So we also did get good response there that some people have felt safe in the parks they visited. So all positive in some regards. So the other bit of the survey that we're seeing is the actionable responses, which is always helpful, I think, from Marty's perspective, not to speak for you, but things that you can tangibly do and kind of maybe add to your list of what are we checking off the box to improve our community. So this is where we start to see more dogs in parks, allowing pets, continuing transition away from wood chips. That's in relation to playground surfacing. Smaller parks should have more programming than just a little piece of equipment, right? Let's maybe talk about Wilson Park a little and how you guys are trying to improve that space to put it into context. And then sort of lighting, inclusive equipment, things that are themed, I'd say, across park and rec planning, kind of statewide. So that's where we're at with the survey. We tentatively were thinking of closing it kind of the end of the month. There's not a real great reason to close it. It can remain open on the software, and we can simply cut it off if we needed to at a certain date. So I think, in our opinion, keeping it open and just continuing to request input is a good approach at this point. So any immediate questions about that? Otherwise, I'll kind of keep going.
I mean, it doesn't sound like you'll see a lot of swing and opinion by leaving it open a little bit longer. Like something earth-shattering is going to come after the end of July, correct? Is that kind of what your thought process is?
Yep.
You just might tweak something down a little bit better.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like the idea of leaving it open. If it's not going to impact your final report, the more data we can collect, the better.
All right. So getting into some of the triage of the previous plan, looking at population projections, I wouldn't necessarily say change to NRPA standards, but just kind of a slight shift in what's being looked at. The way that community parks are defined, and then this quantitative versus qualitative analysis that we've started to look at that goes into kind of every court plan. So there's a lot of data on these tables. I'll just hit them very high point, but population projections, obviously you can see the historical growth. In short, the city is sort of leveling off as you've urbanized, and there's not a ton of land left to develop. I think there's no surprise there. What the last corp was based on is the 2013 Department of Administration projections, or baseline data and then projections from there. That data has not been updated. The projections have not been updated. So sort of responding to that, there's a couple approaches we can take. We can take the approach that you took in the last corp, which is just to use that We can get the 2020 baseline census data and then use projections from there based on the DOA numbers. We can do a compounding look, which is generally just the same percentage increase over time, or we can do a straight line projection. In talking with staff, we think kind of using the DOA projections is probably the best approach, and frankly, at the end of the day, you're talking about 1,000 people difference, no matter which way you go. I'll show you the impacts of what that looks like in some of the other tables when we talk about metrics for park needs. So, existing inventory, this is just a breakdown of kind of what you've had. Obviously, you've lost Humana Park on the lease there. You've gained what we're calling Waterview Heights Park down off Lost Dolphin. There's about 2 acres in a subdivision that is yet to be programmed, but it's been reserved. So some of the change you're seeing there, not a ton of change, as you probably well know. So at the end of the day, you're talking about 450 acres of parkland. Add on to that about 179 acres of school parkland, both your sort of K through 12 as well as St. Norbert land that's available to the public that just simply exists here. So from a quantitative analysis look, we use that 450 number in terms of your total park acreage, and then that's how we get to kind of the needs analysis. So what I'm showing in table 3 is the difference between how your parks are classified. And when we talk about a change to the NRPA, National Rec and Park Association standards, we're talking about the way that parks are classified. So in the past, it was very much based on community park, neighborhood park, mini park. How many acres of each do you have, and do you have enough based on 1,000, based on the ratio per 1,000 residents? And so that was the breakdown in the past. So now it's more of just an overall ratio of park acreage to residents per 1,000. So I'll show you that in the next table, but the point of this is you guys, in addition to mini park, neighborhood, community park, which is great, you've also classified large urban parks as its own category, and those are really just Southwest and Voyager. The way we've sort of interpreted that is those are community parks. They just happen to have more programming than the others, right? They've got your special events. So all well and good. That's a fine approach to this. We, from our perspective, think that those then get classified sort of as community parks, right? So that's the 62 versus 179 there, which if we look at the next, I'll just jump right into this. Looking at the acreage needs, you start to see if you classify only community parks by definition, you've got 62 acres. Therefore, in the red, you've got a deficit. You need more community park acreage. But if you include Southwest and Voyager as defined as community parks, you don't need any additional acreage. Jumping back a slide, that breakdown of community neighborhood mini park has sort of been shifted away from on a national standard to look at just park acres per 1,000 residents. So what we did here was look a little bit outside of Brown County, look at more comparisons statewide based on your population. So we're looking, you know, obviously you can see all the different counties there. You've also got some here in Brown County, some of your neighbors, but comparatively you all are doing at average, if not above average, compared to sort of some of your population size statewide. So you are also in the upper quartile from a national perspective in terms of having sufficient park acreage for your residents. That's the quantitative analysis portion of it.
So when you look at this slide you've got right here, you talked about us having a deficit unless we include Voyager and Southwest Park. So based on the definitions you provided previous, those 2 parks would not actually have been counted? How we had them categorized, or what did I miss there? Why is that? Because we call them a large park. Is that?
I can jump in.
Yep.
So historically, when you looked at the definition of a community park via NRPA, there were certain metrics that were involved with that. Size was one, and then the type of amenities that were all included in that park. So when you look at your typical community park, Legion Park, it has a wide variety of amenities, trying to target different components of our community. When we started Southwest Park, it was essentially a soccer complex. So not really there for the entire community, but there for the soccer families, if you will. Over time, Southwest probably has changed a little bit into more of a community park. There's a playground there now. There's a shelter there now. There's open green space. There are trails. There are baseball diamonds. So I think maybe our definition probably has to change with Southwest. However, Voyager would still fit the bill. It really is a passive recreation park that's not designed for all the different categories of service for a park. Hopefully that
So,
helps.
so in other words, it's counted as park space based on the numbers. It just wasn't counted as community park space. Am I saying that right?
I think what Mark was saying is in years past, community parks were straight, for the purposes of the analysis, community parks were straight community parks.
Okay.
Recently now, the concept of these large urban parks are now lumped in with community parks from the acreage perspective.
And that's what that helped, because I was trying to understand why it felt like they weren't a part of that before, but now they seem to be a part of that. Makes more sense. Okay.
Am I off base, Mark?
No, I think you're right on.
Okay.
I think the other bit of this is it's sort of part and parcel with the qualitative analysis too. So the geographic distribution is if you are if you have so many excess acres or you're so deficient, it is also sort of dependent on where you have those. So the notion, we'll look at that in a minute, but the big picture on here, and this table is roughly the same as the next one. This is using the DOA projections. If we wanted to look at the compounding or straight line, it's this. So again, if you do the squint test and just look at the colors, it's roughly the same thing, right? We're talking about just looking at that top table, 65, 76, and 88, and then 70, 86, 95. So again, that's looking out to 2040. Relatively easy to kind of make up in that time. So that's what I mean about either one is sort of sufficient. So again, the facility inventory, this is obviously very difficult to read, but something that's in your plan now that we're taking stock of and sort of incorporating, potentially making some recommendations based on what you have and kind of what we're seeing for programming. That's one of the reasons we're doing the survey, is just to get some input on what facilities you'd like to see, right? What trends are out there, pickleball or fishing or, volleyball courts, more of that. So we'll update this as needed. These are the maps that we're working with and what we kind of had ready for tonight to display, but just a couple simple project location, and really we wanted to showcase some of the natural features which weren't in your previous plan to give people that perspective of kind of, if you stare at this long enough, you've got a good picture of how this community kind of is and operates, right? You've got a boundary on the west with the interstate. You've got a boundary on the east with the East River, also quite an asset. And then you've got the Fox River right down the middle. Throughout there, you've got Ashwaubenon Creek, and then a good distribution of generally parkland throughout. The other maps, your existing park locations based on classifications. And then the big one that's kind of easiest to understand on its face, if you will, is the park service area boundaries. So this begins to look at that qualitative analysis of, do you have sufficient acreage and is it in the right place? So you can start to see where, if we are making recommendations, where we may start to look. One of the features we added on here was that future Southern Bridge connection. You can see how it lands right into some of the areas that have no parks currently. So we can start to begin to have that discussion of what's appropriate. If anything, do we simply recommend, neighborhood parks develop with neighborhoods and we're not actively seeking out parkland, that sort of conversation. So in this, just to give you an idea, the purple area is a 1 mile boundary around community parks. The orange is a half mile boundary and the red is a 1/4 mile. So distances you'd reasonably be expected to walk to get to those facilities if you live nearby. And then, again, sort of speaking to that east side potential, one of the things we do is look at, obviously, the natural features. This is, again, that future southern bridge. Look at your neighbors, what's Ledgeview thinking. They've got the island here, and then obviously we reference it against what your comprehensive plan says. And we've been in touch with other staff to understand, hey, are your population projections matching ours because they need to statutorily? Generally, yes. And then future land use wise, what are you thinking? Your current comprehensive plan talks about an east side industrial park. So is it appropriate, right? That helps to inform the conversation we have around the appropriateness of allocating land for parks or using trails, much like you've done on the west side, or incorporating something like the preserve, right? That sort of feature. So that's where we're at. This is the same graphic you saw early on, so giving you, at least the top portion, giving you an idea of where we're at and where we're going. We're roughly halfway through the process. Yeah, so I've done a lot of talking. Are there any other questions or things you'd like to see, things you'd like us to support?
Actually, Mark, I have a question for you. In the past, we have historically, from the qualitative analysis, the service radius analysis, we have typically incorporated, obviously, Mother Nature barriers, Fox River, but we've also incorporated man-made barriers that make sense to take away from service radius. So railroad tracks, main thoroughfares, et cetera. As you just said, the South Bridge corridor, is that going to become a man-made barrier that would cut off service radius of parks? I've heard about the Southern Bridge for past 15 years. I'll believe it when I see it. But, it's my understanding that that's not just going to be your typical, that's going to be a major arterial, I would believe.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's, as far as I understand it, working in the profession, it's going to be essentially 4 lanes, and it's going to have dedicated bike ped facilities. So from a cutting things off, like becoming a boundary, I would suggest it's not going to become a boundary. In terms of the service area radii, if you were to put a park on the east side, there would probably be the expectation that the Fox River would be your boundary, and that people generally, say on Lost Dolphin, aren't going to cross the river to go to whatever that park is, unless it becomes a community park or has some other facility that's unique to that space. So Southern Bridge, I don't necessarily think so, or even the road that, GV or whatever it is that accompanies that.
Okay.
So trying to think of a good comparison. Yeah. But maybe like Monroe Road through kind of the Ledgeview area that goes north-south. Something similar to that would be my expectation on what GV looks, or what the corridor looks like on either side of the river. So.
I would think it would be more of a barrier only because it's going to carry a lot of truck traffic going into the industrial parks.
Potentially to the south, yeah. I don't know that it'll be prohibitive, because I think it will be designed in a way that it will accommodate people off from a recreational perspective, right? There's not necessarily going to be facilities that are intermingled with traffic. There probably will be a bike lane, much like the northern portion of GV, but I'd suggest there's also going to be a trail that allows more comfortable recreational users to navigate along it, as well as probably get through it at certain intersections, like on the east side there on 32 when it matches in. So.
Yeah, Randy,
Yes, Mark.
just for a clarification point on it, and Grant, I think we have the luxury of time, because we're in 5-year intervals with our plan, and I don't think the bridge will be here within 5 years. But I think that the southern that corridor and that road, while from a planning perspective, I think a lot of times we have the tendency, yes, you can cross that road safely, but it depends on the park, and we also try to incorporate an element of common sense. If there's a mini park and we have a playground program there, the odds of mom sending her 8-year-old by himself to that park is pretty strong. The odds of mom sending her 8-year-old crossing Monroe Road are now a lot more slim than, even though someone could safely do it, mom's not going to send, her 8-year-old son to do that. Therefore, to us, that creates that barrier. But again, that's probably getting ahead of ourselves because we're, this particular plan, we don't really have to worry about that. Next one, we will.
Dads, on the other hand, no problem going over the bridge.
Roger.
They can go.
Gotta tackle it at some point, right?
Other questions for Mark or Brian? Gentlemen, thanks for the status update, and we look forward to seeing the finished product September or October.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda, consideration and possible action on the draft plan for Wilson Park.
Kristen is here from Grafe.
Awesome. Kristen, come on up, please.
Yeah, except there's just scroll to whatever. Actually, Kristen, I'll tell you what, why don't you come here, just because in case we have other people from the public wanting to ask questions. So you can just come right here. Sorry about that.
Just grab the mouse.
Thanks, guys.
Same mouse. Well, hello, everyone. We have, in the past meeting, we presented two concepts, and we kind of had them as one that's a little bit more of an active concept where the edge was activated, and then we had one concept that was a little bit more passive, and it was also focused more on the internal part of the park, kind of connecting with pathways inside. So based on that previous discussion, we have identified the second concept, the passive concept that's internal, as the preferred concept. So what we have here, there's a couple of pages that were included. So one is just the existing site, that's the first page, the one before this. Then this one, which is the actual concept drawing. And then the third page has some of that imagery, kind of precedent imagery to explain some of the ideas that are drawn in plan in the park. So the plan has been modified slightly since the last time that you saw it. The same core ideas are there. So we really celebrated that memorial tree and created that pathway that kind of wraps around the tree, not to disturb the tree. It'll stay in place as is. It's a beautiful tree. So the pathways wrap around there with some enhanced planting. So we're thinking in that area that it's something, so right now there's a lot of trees in the park. So the idea where you see those kind of pink shaded areas, that's meant to be a little bit more, maybe some shrubs, maybe some perennials, maybe some grasses, really adding four-season interest in the plantings in the park and adding maybe some color too, so maybe some fall color. On that end of the park, that tree is really beautiful in spring, but thinking about fall and other seasons. The pathway the pathway is a pathway mix, a stabilized pathway mix that we're proposing. So what you see is that serpentine gray line that goes through the park. That's a walkway, and we're suggesting a more naturalized material. It's the same this is the same that you saw in the last time too. So there's a couple of different options, but both options are ADA accessible. But it looks a little bit more kind of like it's compressed, it's gravel, but it's kind of looks a little bit like more of a natural, like a dirt pathway, kind of that you would see in a more naturalized setting. So it has a little bit more naturalized look to it. Then within we have some benches scattered throughout there. In the center, so there's a community garden that's identified there, and again, that can be more perennials, a planting for color. There could be some annual planting in there, so it's meant as a community garden to be kind of celebrated in terms of what people would like to see in there, and if there's a club or someone that wants to maintain it. And that's where we have relocated that Lincoln Memorial. So which was, we had it on College, it is on College, and we had it, we left it on College in the last plan because of the historical nature and, kind of some conversations perhaps because it could be fragile. Do we keep it there? So in that past discussion, there was, let's celebrate it. So let's really think about how we can move it and get that done. And so that's in that center. So if you can imagine, there'll be, some more colorful plantings in there and a really beautiful garden, and that will be the centerpiece inside of that, that element. So we had a couple of things in the last plan, those kind of odd shaped dark green shapes, and then it's dotted, it's the number 7 on the plan, but they're dotted in. Those are the dotted number 7, that's a hammock grove, and the weird dark green shapes, those are those resting knolls, kind of the constructed little small berms. So what we did is reorganize that a little bit based on the feedback from you all. So in the previous plan, the hammock stand, so those are like the 2 posts where you string the hammock between. They were kind of along that pathway, if you remember. So what we did instead is we relocated under that really big basswood tree that's there, and so put some kind of a little bit more in the shade, some of them a little bit more in the sun, so kind of clustered together but spaced apart in that area. So there's some shady, some sunny areas for use for those hammock stands. And then we expanded those knolls, and those were on the first concept, Concept A or Concept 1. And so we added those into these concept and created these spaces for people to kind of these are thought to be more naturalized kind of social spaces, and it's just allowing some various types of seating in the park. So we have some benches, and then we have these knolls, and they can be totally natural. We can add a little bit of maybe some rocks in there, kind of think about like stones, or even built-in benches into there. So there's a couple different ways that you can integrate seating into those, or just leave them natural because they're just fun to lay on and hang out on. And then the lighting stays the same in this plan. So there's new lighting at the 4 corners. There's lighting across the southern end of the park where the fronts of those houses, kind of those property lines face the park. So there's lights along there. And then there's lights along the path inside that pathway that runs through the park. So this concept also had what we call moonlighting, and it's just really lovely. It adds some additional lighting into the park, but it also adds really nice aesthetic lighting. And this is lighting that would be year-round, and it's accomplished through using basically they're adjustable collars, so to speak, that go in the tree, and the lights shine down through the leaves, and it replicates. It's just really beautiful. It replicates the look of like moonlight coming through the tree leaves and shining onto the ground. So it creates a really nice effect in the park, a very natural, pleasant effect in the park. We do have a water source in there, so there's different options, for either watering. If you do have like an annual garden that needs more watering, have a water source for gardening, water fountain for people, and maybe for dogs. We heard a lot about dogs in that last presentation. So there's some different options for that water source. I think that I'm just pausing for a moment to think. I think those are all the changes, and those are the highlights for the design and some of the imagery. I don't know if I can scroll down. Nope.
I use the little.
Just go here. Okay. Yeah. All right, got it. So the imagery corresponds with some of the things that I just described, the hammocks in the upper left, that on the two lower left images, that middle one, that's a nice scale of those resting knolls that we talked about. Those are just natural. There's nothing built in or rocks in those. But that shows you kind of the scale of what we think those knolls might be. The compressed gravel in the center, that shows kind of what that pathway mix looks like. The next image down is kind of that downlighting, that moonlighting in the trees. And then some additional lighting. The city has the lighting that's on the far right are the existing vehicular and then pedestrian scale lights, so that are in the downtown for sure. So that's what we would suggest, is that you just continue that, that similar look in this park. And then, some suggestions for the benches. So the one that's in the middle, if you can see my cursor, let me see. Can you see my cursor? Yeah. So this one, that's similar to what was put in Michael Walsh Plaza there. So those actually have, they're lit, like undermount lighting that shines down, and then there's these plexiglass panels on them. So you can do the lighting. The image to the below that is another version of that bench, just without the panel and without the lighting. But again, it would kind of repeat some of the same language of the furniture that you have in another part of the downtown. I think that covers all of the different elements and the imagery and the changes that we saw from last time. So I will pause and ask if there's any questions on that, or if there's anything that isn't represented the way that we thought based on the last conversation at the last meeting.
Questions?
Randy? Just two comments for the park board. One thing that was noted at the last meeting, both from the city perspective and St. Norbert College was here, had indicated that both St. Norbert as well as us have no problem if that fence would go away, the one that runs north and south. So we would recommend removing that section of fence. The other thing is maybe more of just a clarification note. In your legend, there's a little box that identifies playground. There is not a playground that's actually identified in there. So I don't want to have someone thinking, well, where's the playground going? Well, it's not. It's actually not part of the proposed plan. So what would happen is from this point, so the park board, with our agreement with Grafe is looking for final tweaks to this particular plan. You know, we are in a thought process that this is very close. So they're looking for final comments, for final tweaks, little adjustments. Then what they will do is take those comments, go back, tweak the plan, and then create a cost opinion, and then bring it back for the park board final review.
Jim?
Just one question, Marty, on those resting knolls, does your existing mowing equipment just go over that all right, or do you?
Well, the knolls are not there right now, so these would be created.
I mean, if they were created, would
So
that cause any
if
problem?
they were created, we would need to make sure that they are created with height and slope in mind, that our mowers could continue to mow them. The knolls that you see, like in the picture that Kristen is showing, our 6-foot mowers would be able to handle those.
Okay.
Now, if you start going to about 8 feet tall with a 45-degree angle, we're going to have a problem. But that's not what those knolls are showing.
Okay, thanks.
Dean?
It was a good question from Jim, because I know we have some mowing concerns on slopes, so I agree, make sure that works, not putting in that comment anyway. I wasn't so sure about the hammock stands until this last weekend, when I had the opportunity to actually hang out in one of those hammocks tied between a couple of trees. It's actually a lot cooler than I thought it was. The fact that it didn't break was also even more impressive. But those little hammocks like that, where, I mean, literally at one point when I was trying to hide, I just pulled the whole thing over top and I was all cocooned up inside of it. But I mean, I'm kind of warmed up to that idea. I think those are kind of a nice feature now, especially when you're putting it right next to the college. You know, I think that'll be a really heavily used piece. Might find me sleeping there someday. Who knows?
They are incredibly popular and growing in popularity. So
How many of those how many hammocks could that accommodate in what you're looking at here?
like, let me just go back to the plan. I want to say 4 or 5. So right now, there's 3 ovals in there now, so we were thinking maybe 3 to 5 is what we were thinking. But it's up to you all what you'd like to see.
They're all kind of connected and clustered in that one area?
They are.
Okay. Would it be reasonable to put another one on the other side of the park, or?
Yeah, I think we
The
can
southeast
add.
corner.
I think they
Yeah.
could work in another spot. I think we like the idea of that area because it's a little bit more visible, but yet it's kind of tucked in amongst the trees. And there's opportunities to do shade and sun locations, because sometimes you need one and sometimes you need the other, depending on the weather. And So if you'd like to see another cluster of those or a couple more in another spots, I think the area that's, let me just move my cursor. I think over in this area where the knolls are and kind of in this corner might be a really good spot. I don't know if okay, yeah, if I scroll. And then this, in and amongst this larger tree too. So again, you want some in the shade and some in the sun.
I would observe from the people I've seen using them around college campuses and things and parks. Some people like to be isolated and some people like to be in groups. So it's more of a, I want to be off by myself reading, and others are, like I say, in a group. So I think it would be nice to have a balance of that.
Clusters of maybe a couple individuals.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
So more single, well, you need two posts, but, you know, single that are maybe, there's maybe one behind these knolls over here, maybe another one over here, maybe there's one over here. So just kind of maybe a couple more, maybe three more that are just spaced apart from each other. So you don't get another.
Yeah, and I suppose those could be added later too, right, Marty? You could have them on the plan.
Yeah,
See how popular a few of them are. And
I mean, I guess in the grand scheme of these hammock stands, there's a couple of benefits to them. A, they're pretty cost effective. And B, I mean, if you want to put in more, you can do it quickly. And if they're not being used, you can pull them out quickly.
Are any of those trees close enough to connect a hammock to?
I was just thinking that I
And
don't
do another
think
grove?
so.
Okay.
I don't think so. That's a good question though.
Right.
So, just a comment on calling it a community garden, that's kind of confusing with other community gardens we have. It sounds like that's kind of a theme garden. We kind of go with native plants, or we go with, you know, a flower scheme or color scheme, or, yeah, the community garden kind of talks to me about, you know, people planting their own stuff there. So, so when I first saw that, I was like, what is that exactly? But aside from that, when I think of where the monument has been moved to, I really like that. I wouldn't want it too tight to that path, almost recessed a little bit so that you could have some of the shrubbery and the community garden kind of lead you into it, so it's more of a place of prominence, because it is quite a massive plaque, and if it was right next to the trail, it'd be a lot.
So your suggestion is that we pull it off the path,
Just
but
that-
create a paved area or extend the crushed gravel pathway. So you create a little node off the path. So there's space where you can step off the path and then read the plaque. You're not standing in the path. Does that explain it?
Yeah,
What you're thinking?
it's just recessed just a little bit rather than being like right on the edge of the trail.
Yeah.
Again, this is just a diagram. We're a long way from actually putting it there, but thought it was worth mentioning.
We can add that to the plan.
And the nice thing is now that we've all been educated on the plaque being there, that's makes us appreciate it even that much more. So,
Amy.
Marty, how many parks do we have with water in them? I mean, that I'm assuming this would be like you can access it yourself, and community garden has it, but not like any of our other parks, water fountains and things like that. But
Well, there's a lot of variables to this particular discussion. When you talk our community garden, which is where people come in and plant tomatoes and stuff like that, we actually don't have a utility that is run with water. We have like a 500-gallon tank that sits out there and they pull from that.
yeah,
This particular location, to Ryan's point, our term of community garden, I think, gets confused with what the intent of this is. It's more of a garden, a flower garden, I think, is what we're more envisioning. With that particular type of garden, we would really need to run a utility and a water fountain or a spigot or a water. We'd have to have something versus having a water tank, because, well, it would be unsightly for what we're trying to do here. So we would need to run water, and that would need to be part of our. So do we have that in other locations? yes, it's not often, but we, like Bicentennial, we have a water spigot there. Dog Park, we have a water spigot there. So it's, we have done it.
I'm just wondering from the cost-effective aspect, if that's worth maintaining, investing in the water, that is another vandalism opportunity, if you will, or if maybe just planting things that are more sustainable is the better route to do for something like this. If that, because I don't remember that being talked about at all. Was it added as from some other insights? As far as like having water access or a community garden, like I don't ever remember having conversation about that.
I don't know if it was talked about, but if you have a very in-depth garden, water really is a must.
Right. And that's why I'm just wondering if that's the most cost-effective thing to do with a very passive park that we're trying to create, right? Just a concern that I don't know that that's worth the time and
Well, the other thing that you can do, again, this isn't being built tomorrow, and nor do we have a penny allocated for it. I would suggest that you plan for it, and if the cost is too high, that's one of the lower priority items that get lopped off, and then we have to adjust the garden.
That's a good suggestion. The other thing that picnic tables was brought up and had been mentioned, and that's not represented in here at all, for people to be able to actually bring a laptop and work or sit and play a game or eat lunch.
We had some furniture, so I wondered if maybe there's no images of it on here. I'm thinking there isn't. But we had furniture and seating. We can include that with the next one. But where there's benches that actually have laptop tables integrated into it now, it's amazing park furniture that they make, so that you could sit and work on your laptop. So if I don't recall the discussion about picnic tables specifically, though, so if that was an interest to add some additional seating in some sort of like picnic table or some other table and chair type configuration, similar to the bump outs that you guys did downtown on the west side of downtown with like the anchored picnic tables. What was that?
You're talking about the art alley right on Main?
Right by that, right in front of that, yeah.
Right by Nikki's?
There's like they're anchored, but they're kind of like a different style picnic table. If you wanted to incorporate something like this, we can absolutely add that into the plan. The idea was that there are benches that have laptop tables with them, so it's just a matter if you want them on the paved area, in the grass, because right now I think there's maybe 2 or 3 picnic tables that are brought out into the park seasonally. Is that right, Marty?
I think every year it would vary.
Yeah, so there's just 1 or 2 or something like that. So it could be that, or it can be different anchored, more formal furniture.
I think the use of a table that's nice for socialization. I understand that a bench with a laptop tabletop is nice, but it doesn't allow for having a lunch with somebody. Go ahead.
Amy, just is your thought, when it comes to the picnic table, is your thought to have a permanent structure picnic table or a roving? 'Cause if it's
I'd
a
be open
portable,
to either. I just would want it such that you could play cribbage with somebody.
so the base of my question would be is if your thought process is that we would have portable picnic tables, that's probably not the place on this particular plan, because essentially picnic table will be here one day, it'll be there next day, it'll be all over the
Yeah,
place.
so then I guess I would think it would be something that's.
Yeah. If it's
like
portable,
benches.
then it would stay off the plan, and we just bring them in, and we bring in as many as A, we have, and B, what we think is needed there. So it could be 3, could be 5, could be 10. But if you want something more permanent, then yes, then I think it should be part of your plan.
I think that would be beneficial, so that it would be part of the plan.
If you do that, then the picnic table likely does need to be along the path, because when you have a facility, you need to have an ADA accessible route to that particular. So it's not like we'd be able to put a picnic table in, the middle of the grass area. You could, but then you'd have to run a pathway to it. When you have the portable picnic table, we have the luxury of not having to run those ADA accessible routes.
So if you want a permanent table, where would you like it to be?
Well, I would leave that up to the
Kristen?
design, yeah.
So what we would, we will work that in, but what I'm thinking is that it's, it's along, if you can see my cursor, like somewhere along this pathway here. And what we would do, similar to kind of how these benches are just off the pathway, we would do something similar. So let's just say here, we would add a little bit of a bump out and then put something that can be anchored in that. And you can anchor the furniture into that pathway mix too. So I would suggest something like that. And are we thinking maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe 3? What would you like to see in the plan?
I guess too, I would think of that as a tiered strategy and budget. So if it's in the 1 to 3.
Yeah, if it's okay with you, that's something that
Yep.
Kristen
Yep.
and our staff, we can discuss and come up with a thought, what we think is best.
Dean?
So when we look at this open area that's there, do you know how much space we have there? And I guess my thought is, I know that we're talking about kind of a passive area or a passive park, but knowing, how students are, I mean, I'm thinking, and of course, this is summer, so they're not here as much, but spring, fall, it's, I forget with Smash Ball and some of the other games that they play, so I'm not sure how much space is there for them to work with, whether it's Frisbees, that, is it called Smash Ball? What the hell am I thinking?
Spike ball.
Spike Ball, yeah, Smash Ball's aging myself, right? It's not hacky sack anyway, right, Marty? But those types of games that can be played there, is there enough space in that area to do that kind of stuff?
So it's flatter over here. So I think we suggested as part of the overall plan to kind of provide some kind of surface level grade, just to smooth it out. It's very uneven, hard to walk on.
Right.
So we just need some kind of just general grading, but that doesn't change the grade of the site. It just basically fills in some of the divots and holes and stuff that makes it more regular. So there's a little bit of slope. I don't know if this has that. It doesn't. Okay. So there's a little bit of slope. Kind of, you can see my cursor like over here on this part of the site, and then over on this corner of the site, it's a little bit flatter. So I would think we can measure it up and see kind of what the space requirements is for that and how that fits in there, and just confirm that. Now, there's some space, kind of some open area off the trail here. I don't know how level it is, like what the requirements are for some of those games, but my sense is that it could be kind of along College here. It's a little bit flatter, kind of up in this area and up in here.
I don't think there's really a
aside from the
requirement
furniture
for it, is
putting.
that they just have to have space to screw off, and I think that, I'm just wondering, how much is there that they can actually do some of those things that congregate in those types of ways. So if there's slope there, I think if I was in college, I'd still play the game right there anyway, because the most open space I've got, right? But I'm just curious.
There's a fair amount of green space that's there. You are not going to play a football game,
No.
but there is enough room for 2 people to play catch. There's enough room for people to play Frisbee. Certainly enough room to play hacky sack.
We assume. And then we'll invent the game Smash Ball because it does sound fun. We just don't know what that looks like yet. So
If it's what I think it is, I think there's definitely, there's definitely space for it here too, which Marty
there
was
is
talking
slope.
about.
Okay.
But I think it would fit up here too. I would be surprised if it doesn't, but I'll have to research it and just make sure.
I was just curious if there was space there. I didn't realize there was slope in that area, but I think as a college student, you're going to take the space you can get.
There actually
Right.
is a game called Smash Ball.
Is there?
It's like paddleball. Yeah.
Oh, well,
So maybe.
Did I invent that?
Yeah, you did not, but somebody might play it there, so.
all right. There's another $1 million idea out the tubes, down the tubes.
Jim?
Thanks. Back to the tables for a second. I'm envisioning those, either concrete or metal tables have the built-in chairs with backs on them, like square. And if you did multiples of them, you could have one that you could roll up to it.
Wheelchair.
Yeah, with a wheelchair.
Or strollers.
And have one without a seat.
So you can do that. There's definitely options for accessible seating. Sometimes the strategy is that if you have a picnic table, you have one side with a longer bench, one side with a shorter bench. Others are designed so that wheelchair access is at the ends. So there's different furniture options that we can provide some examples of that, and you can select the one that works the best. I'm not sure what you guys did on downtown over there, because I feel like some of them do that. Maybe I'm misremembering, but.
If there's anybody who would like to address the board on this issue, we can open the meeting. Is there anybody who would like to speak? The chair.
Move to open.
Thank you.
Second. Random.
All those in favor of opening the meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion carries. We are in open session. If anyone would like to address the park board, please step forward. Remember to state your name and address, please, for the record.
Jonix, 227 Bell Avenue. I think we made some good progress on kind of the refining of this concept design. I like the fact that the Gettysburg Address Memorial has been changed. There's probably some work to be done in terms of how it's mounted and kind of how it's historically preserved, but that's something quite doable. I'm okay with the removal of the playground equipment. I think with the passive design, probably wasn't appropriate anyway. If I have one criticism of the concept, it is I'm not really a fan of the gravel walkway. I think over the long term, something a little bit more permanent and stable would probably be better. But I understand some minds might differ about that. But I'd prefer a concrete or a stamped concrete, something like that for the pathway. It's just going to be a little bit of a more finished look for that part of it. I think the really most important part of all this is the part that comes next with the detailed design when we see what the planting design is, and also with respect to what happens to the slope. For those of you who've been out there, I think you probably know that the park has been neglected for such a long time that there are dips and swales and holes, and the grass itself is really kind of a disaster. So something really needs to be done to kind of even out those irregularities and get good grass in there. Dean, I think when you're talking about the areas where kind of the open play areas, I think it's especially important for that. If they just leave it the way it is, it'd be a disaster, but it has a lot of potential, really to be straightened out. At this point, my biggest concern is not having a plan and not having a good plan necessarily, but it is whether it actually gets done and gets built. Okay, and I look at the timing of this is that we're in July, but the budgeting process for the city probably starts in a month or two. And my guess is that Grafe will probably be back with a plan which is probably close to a biddable plan, or at least a plan in which there could be a budget attached to it, probably just at the limit of the timing for the budget for next year. And my biggest concern of this is that if we miss the budget for next year, then what will happen is that all the work that's been done by the park board and by Marty and by Grafe will just sit for another year. And we'll be back a year from now, and whether there will be continued momentum to get this done or not, I don't know. So one of the things that I would encourage would be a very good discussion among the park board, and especially among the three alderpersons on the park board who are, close to half of the council at this point, with respect to what kind of commitment you're actually going to make to get the project done, and then also to discuss what the timing of that would be. From my selfish standpoint as an advocate, I'd like to see the council put money in the budget starting next year to get, if not all of this done, at least a piece of it done, and then a schedule for having it done in the future. So those are my comments. Quite seriously, my compliments to to everyone. This has been, 2 years since we've been talking about this. But to get from where we were then to this and the potential for getting the work done is a terrific thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Is there anyone else who would wish to address the board? I had a motion to go back and.
Second. Did you make the motion?
Yes, I did.
Okay, second.
There we go. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We're back in regular order.
Hey, Randy, really quick. So, made eye contact with Marty, but the budgeting process already started. But I also think that a membership to Next Level Fitness would help strengthen your body enough that you could twist the arm of the mayor to make sure it gets into the budget, because ultimately he's the one that's going to put it together. Marty's going to suggest it, but trying to outmuscle James is probably the way to go with that. So.
Thank you for the suggestion.
At least you know where the heat's got to go, right? Of course, he never listens to this meeting, so we should be okay on how this conversation went. He'll hear about it, I know. I'll get a text later. The one thing I would add, I appreciate all of Joe's comments, and there obviously are tools and things that we can do to help smooth out those areas to make that nice. I mean, we know from a construction standpoint, all that stuff can happen. I do like the crushed gravel myself from that natural look. I can understand the stay-up concrete or something, but I think the cost might go a little higher with those things, especially concrete costs. From the table standpoint, I think a table might be an okay feature, but I don't want it to get to the point where we're populating so many things around the path that it kind of takes away from some of the open aesthetics of it. So if we're putting a table in, maybe a bench has to come out. So I would just kind of balance that out from a spacing and aesthetic standpoint, so we're not overpopulating that with seating. But yeah, overall, I think I'm kind of liking where this process is going here. So
Marty and then Melissa.
Just three things. Turn your mic on first.
Yes.
Two quick clarifying points. When it comes to the trail, I'm not sure you have to make a decision on the makeup of it at this point in time. There are pluses and minuses to both. Mm-hmm. If you were to ask me as the director, I would love to have a concrete sidewalk that goes through there. The least amount of maintenance that you can ask for. Pavers would be great, but pavers are a little higher maintenance. The crushed granite looks great when you first put it in. However, I will tell you that is probably our biggest maintenance nightmare that we have. We have crushed granite out at Southwest. Water hits it, erodes, puddles, you name it. It's a bugger to keep maintaining and looking nice.
Marty, could I interject
yes.
one thing? So there is an option to add a wax polymer blend, which keeps it stabilized. And so there's one that's just compressed. It remains permeable, so water can percolate through. The wax polymer blend, it is not. So you maintain the natural look of that path. It's lower cost per square foot than concrete, but then the maintenance is very minimal.
Does it prevent weeds from coming up?
I will check for you. I believe so.
Going back to
the
more, I don't know if you have to make that decision right now. The other part too is on the slope. I think correcting the slope would be great. The one thing I don't want to do is, as we talk about that, I think we should try to do that. But the vision of this wonderful, glorious grass blanket at Wilson Park probably will never happen because of the amount of trees that are in. If you look in a forest, there is no grass. The more tree, you can't grow grass when there's no sun. So, granted, I think we need to level that out, but I want to temper people's enthusiasm that we're going to have this glorious Lambeau Field type of grass out there, because that probably will never happen. Unless we get rid of trees. And I don't really want to do that. Anyway, sorry.
Thanks. Melissa, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. This process, I think, really started with the proposal from St. Norbert to buy that land, and a number of individuals from the neighborhood came forward and thought that wasn't such a great idea. And then the conversation started rolling as to how can we improve that park. So I just want to thank those who are here who have been advocates for that park from the beginning and who have been very thoughtful in their input and in working with the Parks Board and getting us to a place where we're at today.
Well said. Dean?
So last but not least, Jim and I were having a little side conversation. This might not be a good idea, but Stephen King did live in these areas around that park. So Joe laughs because he knows. I don't think we want to pay any kind of monument or anything that way, do we? I just want to make sure so it doesn't come from conversation in the community.
I'll defer to Randy on that one.
I think that's outside of the scope of the agenda item.
Okay,
right now.
perfect. That's what I was hoping for. See, Jim, well, we threw it out there anyway. I mean,
That's right.
you don't necessarily
If you want to add it as a future agenda item, go
No, I
right
think we're
ahead.
good. We got our answer.
Maybe after we get a budget, then maybe we go looking for a donor.
Yeah.
It's an
Saying.
option.
All right. Based on Grafe bringing this back, I don't think we need any action on this, correct, Marty?
Yes, we do.
We do need action?
Yeah. Posted to approve.
All right.
Second?
Thank you. I think that was a motion by Melissa to approve. Thank you.
I thought it was.
All right. If it was not, you can,
Nope, I am very,
all right, thank
very
you.
impressed with this.
Any-
So my question would be motion to approve based on some of the thoughts and recommendations presented, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
I
Any opposed?
No, I think I'm
The
good.
motion carries. Thank you, Jim, Joe. Thank you, Kristen. Kristen, we look forward to seeing you again with a finalized plan.
Maybe just
All right, the road continues for Wilson Park. Next item on the agenda, consideration and possible action to approve the 22-23 year-end financial statements for the De Pere Ice Arena. Marty, are you gonna put our financials up for us on the screen or not? Would you be kind enough to do that?
That would be your bottom line comparison for the years.
Thank you, Marty.
So, and just, don't ask me to go through line item by line item, because I won't be able to do that. But the very last item that you're looking at, that is the dollar amount. With our agreement with the ice arena, they are required to split the net profits, and then 50% of that goes into the ice arena fund for future repairs, maintenance, et cetera. So, the check that came in was $7,300, so that goes into the coffers for the ice arena fund. And that's not the only money that goes in there. Please keep in mind, there is that surcharge that we've been implemented for what, 3 years now, Grace? Or so.
One more page down that shows it.
Is that the surcharge? Oh,
So it's actually positive now.
yeah. So we're finally, yeah, so Grace just highlighted, thank you. We are finally out of the red from when the chiller system blew up. So we are now in the black,
Ready for the next.
ready for the next expense, which
Yes.
there's 2 expenses that'll be coming your way for consideration in the
Thanks.
budget.
Dean,
So just looking at the balance sheet on here, it looks like there's been some pretty big changes in terms of looking at what we had in the bank as well as receivables. We're talking about, almost a $48,000 reduction in savings and receivables. So does that have to do with a lot with the expenses we had to pay for the chiller? Is that where all that money went to?
Yes. So the chiller system cost in the tune, don't ask me to quote the exact number, but the chiller was about a $250,000 expense.
Okay.
So that surcharge essentially has been the bulk of what's been paying back to the city.
Okay. Because it's a pretty big shift in our balance sheet here.
Yes.
Now, the other thing I will say, and I'll bring this up again because I've done it before, but are we getting to a point where we have that conversation about the long-term life of this facility and maintaining it and keeping it open?
Carefully speaking, I think yes.
Okay.
Now, what will be coming forward in your budget proposal and recommendation to the mayor is that we do a condition analysis of the ice arena.
Okay.
And I think that is the trigger for all the conversation to come after that.
Okay. Sounds good.
Questions, discussion? Motion to approve is in order.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, consideration and possible action to approve an amended agreement with Best Stump Grinding to remove city stumps in the amount of $44,784.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Staff update. Staff update of Project 2312 Playground Surfacing.
Staff update is unfortunately, we had no bids. So it is being rebid. We did some we did some investigation via the phone. We found out one of the main bidders just completely messed up. They had every intention, they just got the deadline wrong. So it is being rebid, and it will be intended to come back to the August Park Board meeting.
Thank you. Staff update on fire damage to the Southwest Park Pavilion.
So we finally made some headway. Insurance gave us clearance to move forward. We have a consultant under contract with the city in REL. They gave us an estimate of reviewing the damage, designing the repair to the facility, bidding the project out, and doing construction management of the repair. We submitted that estimate to the insurance. They just gave us approval to move forward, and REL was informed to go full steam ahead. So I believe they have started their process already. Not as quick as we had liked, but we are finally moving forward.
Great.
Marty, has, I don't want details, but has there been any headway in finding the person responsible for this?
The person, it is my understanding that a person was found and charged.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And I'm assuming the city will seek restitution?
We have put, we've received documents from the courts, and we have requested restitution.
Okay.
I don't know how much we'll get. 'Cause
I know.
the other thing to know too, during this time, while parts of the facility are not usable to the public, the two most important things, the men's and women's bathroom, are. So the restrooms are available for public use.
That's an important factor when it comes to my use of the parks. All right, we really should be asking a lot of questions. So anyway, next up, staff update on Nelson Family Pavilion status.
So we are also gaining some headway with Nelson. I believe I updated with the soil issue last time. We are now at a point, we have made contact with the DNR, did not hide anything. We didn't pull any punches. We explained what's going on. Our environmental consultant from McMahon has indicated his discussion with the DNR went very well. They have indicated to him that there would be no holdups from their end and that they don't foresee any issues. However, we do need to submit a permit. They don't feel the permit will take very long. I don't know what that means. So quick is one thing in my definition compared to maybe someone from the DNR. But we're cautiously optimistic that we'll get a permit somewhat soon. As soon as we get that, then city administration will sit down and determine, assuming the permit is just free and clear and no contingencies, which that's what we're anticipating. We will then sit down with the mayor and our city administrator and make a determination of, do we accept the bid from IEI and go with the change order for GeoPeers, because that is still required, or do we rebid? So we're getting very close to, actually if the stars would align right, we could be very close to breaking ground. So we'll, hopefully in the next couple weeks here, we're going to have some very good answers.
And additional fundraising has been successful. Can you comment about that?
There are still, there is an organization out there that we are working with. They have not wrote us a check, but they've indicated that they have a very sizable check that they are looking at donating to the facility, sorry. The mayor is also talking with a group that potentially could offer another very sizable donation. The cookies and donut sale, you know, that kind of money, we're not doing any of that anymore. We're looking for a handful of big donors right now, and some are in the works.
I was so looking forward to buying a donut and a cookie, but
We can probably arrange something. Right?
At the beer garden.
Yeah, the beer garden,
There we
which
go.
is next Tuesday at 4:30, shamelessly speaking.
All right, future agenda items. Stephen King? No?
No.
No.
Well, we're looking for a street name for that one, so we'll take that to Public Works.
All right. If not, a motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.